This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS. This is actually an unreleased episode that I'm about to put on here. This is an episode from the beginning of Cruel Summer last year. This is actually the intro episode that we recorded, and I waffled back and forth on whether I was going to release this, basically because of the content. But I do like the story, so I've gone back and now bear in mind, this goes with the Cruel Summer episode. So if you want to hear sort of what's being talked about and then continue with it, you'll actually have to go back to the summer of 2021, and you can listen to the episodes that are marked Cruel Summer from start to finish, and they tie into what's being talked about here. One of the things that changed was we did realize when we did VICAP searches, which is that's a search that you can do through the FBI website. The VICAP searches are what match the name of cases. But we talk about the rest of the things sort of going on here in the Cruel Summer episodes. And this is sort of a throwback case. But you can listen to this episode and realize that it does continue. Now, the summer of 2022 will be different than the Cruel Summer. We're not doing that again. We sort of address why in this episode and then throughout. But this is an episode I originally had not released that I kept thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. And I decided that I should release it. The audio was not exactly where I wanted it to be. So I didn't plan on releasing it. I am releasing it now, sort of to promote last year's summer episodes, which is Cruel Summer. And the reason for doing that is there's a lot of new people in the feed. There are people messaging me about those different older episodes. And I'm releasing this one because it is referenced in the Cruel Summer episodes. Although this episode did not release, this was supposed to be sort of the kickoff to that. So that's the episode that you'll hear in just a moment.
You posited, can you read a story and pretend it has no ending? And I'm not super great at that. However, I can tell a story and not give the ending. And so basically, the case that you brought to my attention, after reading the story, essentially what happened was a woman and her 16-year-old daughter, along with her sister-in-law and her sister-in-law's 11-year-old son, they were found to be shot to death by a neighbor who saw a body through a window. They happened upon the house and, they felt like something was amiss and they called the police. And sure enough, there were 4 people shot to death within the home. And, as happenstance has it, the mom's vehicle was found burnt out, and it was, now I'm not sure where the proximity of the vehicle was with regard to where the first 4 bodies were found. However, the father of the 16-year-old, so the husband, the estranged husband of the woman, and the brother of the sister-in-law. Man, could I make that more complicated? Okay, so the father was found he was found about 200 yards away from a burned down house. So first responders responding to the fire found him not too far away from the house that had burned to the ground overnight. And from there, the burnt out car was 10 miles away from there. Okay. So So we've got basically a lot of dead bodies. So I just told that story without giving the ending, I think.
Yeah. So this is where I'm coming from here, and I'm sort of
That's what I wanted to know. Like, what's your thought on it?
So I'm. It's not that this has anything to do with Israel Keys, but somebody else writes online about him, and they talk about it metastasizing. And then there's another podcast that does the same thing. Every once in a while, I will find myself, not able to sleep, thinking about some weird thing. Like I had one set of FOIA files which I shared with you, and I got some more from. There was a podcaster who was like putting them up on my Patreon. I got those mainly to compare to mine, and then now the Israel Keys Vault is out there. So every once in a while, I will find myself in this terrible, terrible black hole where I think I figured something out, or I'm trying to figure something out. And most recently, I started getting files for things that were not previously available. And those are things that I've started asking you questions about without sharing everything that I'm laying my hands on. There are things about Israel Keys. I'm pretty sure that like we could figure some of those things out from what I've been trying to do.
Well, it's really interesting because, when the vault was released, and I don't know when that was at this point in time, I have not gone through the entire vault. But what I do is I went to the very last thing. So it's like, I think it's 8 parts. And so I went to 8 of 8 and I went through it backwards because it's so monotonous and there's so many repeats. Like it keeps my brain more active, but
Yeah.
I'm not very far. Because I know that the full vault was not accessible until at least after we had recorded a majority of maybe all of it. I don't know, but I know it wasn't, and I'm not sure that there's a lot of new information, but I know I catch way more stuff doing it backwards like that. So
Yeah, I do something similar. I mean, I have even more stuff coming in related to the new round of FOIA requests because after they did a big push, they always get these tips. And you and I don't put a lot of stock into the tips because we found that they are mostly mistaken.
I think they're hilarious, or I think they're interesting. Some of them are hilarious, but like some of them aren't hilarious. They're sad, but like they're interesting. So I don't think they're relevant though.
I tend to agree with you. We're sort of wrapping up Colorado, and we wanted to. I guess we were circling back around, and we're never going to be those podcasters who, one, aren't actually investigating, two, aren't also web sleuthing, and three, run out of stories. As you've seen, I think you recently saw my summer list, and it is there's a lot going on there. But I started to realize some things about Israel Keys that I hadn't realized before. He has these comparison searches. And so when I say he has these comparison searches, is what I mean is the FBI had these comparison searches that I spent a lot of time on. It's interesting. Some of the files we have are not in the vault, which is really weird to me. I didn't understand why that was the case. So we have some information that is not in the FBI vault, which I have gone through now. And I believe it's because I just happened to, I didn't FOIA enough, but I FOIA'd some stuff way back when. And it appears that like some of our information didn't make its way in there. But here's what's interesting to me about this whole thing. I have started to discover some things. And I'm not going to go back into playing his interviews because, to be honest with you, I'm sick of hearing him talk.
I can probably recount it for you.
I'm pretty sure. It's weird because like that's the one thing. Like I can ask you about a movie that you watched last week and you can't tell me who was in it. But if I ask you about an Israel Keys interview, you can quote him and Kevin Feldes and Bell. It's so bizarre to me that you do that.
And it is. So that's weird.
So you started this, and it's your fault. And I'm not going to say with what case right this second on
Yeah, I'm
recording.
really sorry about that.
But you discovered a courier case, and I say that meaning you discovered a case that was very similar to Bill and Lorraine Courier, and it was weird that you did that because I had just discovered an arson that was what I call an impossible arson. Meaning the structure's not right, the timing's not right, the weather's not right. Like certain arsons take a lot of work. And for instance, the house fire that he participated in 2012 down in Texas did not take a lot of work, but it took a lot of effort to burn it the way he did. And that's based on him using some accelerants and his
That's really
place.
funny because he thought for sure they'd never solve it. And like, I know he talked about that after they were like, yeah, like we know about the fire. And he was like, what? But because two separate structures that aren't connected, like rarely ever do what happened, but he didn't.
Right.
I thought that was interesting, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
So, well, no, that's fine. I mean, that is part of what told the tale on this other fire that I'm going to describe. But what was really weird about that one was I had posited about 10 missing persons within X number of miles of this other fire that I discovered. And I didn't know this fire existed because like the way I came across it was actually in the lawsuits between the insurance company and the fire department. That's how I found that fire. So my point is I started looking through the timeline again, and I sort of started going, all right, if I take the timeline and the comparison searches, what am I doing wrong that I can't find certain things? And you had posited a case, and you basically said, look, what about this case for these, this couple? And I was like, oh my God. So I think that you've sort of followed me for a few days there, because after you said that, I went down this rabbit hole that ended in Missouri that I was in for a long ass time. And like, it's not what I was looking for there, but I mean, that is definitely some future cases for us to cover. And in my opinion, they are what you would file under solved, but not proven in court.
Man,
And they are terrible, and they are very interesting, and there is so much more there, but they have nothing to do with Israel Keys. So once I realized that I had discovered an Israel Keys arson, which positive it's him, it's nearly impossible to have committed this fire. In fact, the only duplicate fire like it was proven to have been done for basically insurance purposes. And like that, I won't be able to explain exactly in a podcast because you have to sort of see all the court stuff play out. I will be able to tell pieces of that story, but that is not the point. The point is we found a Keys arson that was hallmarked as a Keys arson. And then I found a couple of interesting cases that I've started to share with you, and I'm sure you're looking at them going, what is he talking about? But I'm having to dig through some stuff in Arkansas that relates back to some cases in Maryland and Delaware. When I started doing that, I discovered that Deborah Feldman was not the only April 9th missing person. She was just the only one that was reported in a way that the FBI would see it. So I started going back through and digging through Deborah Feldman's history, and the police in Deborah Feldman's area knew Deborah Feldman very well, like to the point that they recognized her when they showed up on scenes where she was. So there's more to her story. There's more to a couple of cases that we found along the way related to missing persons, and then specifically missing couples that I've been digging through. But I really get hung up on a couple of things. And I know one of your things was the words remains in New York. So remains in New York was turned into a very specific set of sentences by the FBI, meaning he had abducted a person in one state, murdered them in another state, and dropped them in another state. And I would posit that I believe that Israel Keys I think that he was presenting a hypothetical. that he wanted to see how they reacted to it before he gave them any more information. And that started bothering me about the Tupper Lake bank robbery. And I have been digging for bank robberies this entire time. Every time I come across a new way to search for bank robberies, I just do it. But every once in a while, I'll fall down a rabbit hole with those comparison type searches. And I used to do it by name. I used to go through and I would dig for hours and hours and hours trying to find relationships to the names of the people. That's how we came up with the 4 Rolandos. That's how I came up with multiple different things that were going on, sort of on what we could see of Key's computer, which, by the way, that's not new in the vault. The comparison searches looks the same to me. I think I narrowed down a couple of the sort of extra numbers that they were like nameless resolved cases. And I don't remember how you phrased it, but you basically said that you felt like once Namus scrubbed a case as resolved, you felt like they put some black magic on it or something, some kind of
It's impossible to reconnect a missing person with their MP number once the case has been resolved.
Well, we did it with one of them.
Yeah. Actually, we did. Actually, we did it with more than one.
Yeah, you're right. We did do it with more than one.
But see,
there were still a couple that were lingering out there, and I think I figured out one of them.
I was wondering if we could FOIA that.
I'm working on that now.
I would just FOIA MP number, blah, blah, blah. And I don't think they'll give us, I think it requires a court order.
It looks like it does. It's Texas rules, so it's a little different. But I mean, we could still put that into what we're doing because
it's not a federal FOIA.
Well, what federal agency are you talking about? It's still going to be.
The thing is, like, it doesn't specifically state anything. But the problem is people don't enter themselves into NamUs. They're entered in by other sources. And because of that, in the event someone, turns up for any reason, like, they have rights to not be associated with a missing person number. And it's really sketchy territory. It's not enough to outweigh NamUs's good stuff, but it is enough for them. I'm not kidding when I say, like, some black magic witch scrubs the number from the identity because you can't find it anywhere. Like, how does that ever happen on the internet? Like, you want something to come off of it and it's there forever. You can't get rid of it. But these numbers, they're really hard to find. So I don't know that we'll ever be able to positively link them. The only thing I could say is I know that at a certain point in time, and this would have been like way after Keys had done his search, I actually downloaded the entire database, and you can do that, right? And so I have that at least once, maybe a couple of times. And so I could, in theory, go back in my database and search for the number and find somebody that is no longer listed, but is on the database that I have. But so if you could find somebody who had that information, you might be able to. But aside from that, like, it's just impossible to find.
Right. So there may be some court orders flying around because I'm getting to a point where I may just have to do that to solve my satisfy my curiosity about, at least there's 2 things on there that, like, I'm getting to the point I just have to know, and I have to figure out how to phrase it in a way that, like, could be palatable for the release of that particular angle.
I don't know that. Well, you can do what you want. I don't know.
I really just need a date and a location. I don't really need a name, is my point.
The person, yeah.
So here's the thing with the Israel Keys case. There is not a second season of Israel Keys. It is not possible to do it. Anyone who tells you that it is, they are making up a lot of stuff to make it work. So
I can make up stuff all day long.
So we are not making up a second season of Israel Keys. But what I did think that we have now gotten to the point where I have this massive list of alternatives to everything that's happened with Israel Keys. And what the tipping point there was a couple of cases I found that were open technically, but, like, they aren't being touched, and I think they need to be talked about. There's about 5 of them that I know of right now from my list of things that I've been sort of collecting related to Israel Keys. There's the arson fire that I wanted to discuss because it's a huge deal, because it opens up a different path. But then I've also gone through all of the dates from the comparison searches, and I know someone out there started naming these the NamUs 44. That's not accurate. There were 257 photos. It is not the NamUs 44. It had nothing to do with NamUs. The only thing that comes into play with NamUs is that's the database that the FBI compared against to start with.
Right.
So that Keys and NamUs are not connected. The FBI and NamUs were connected at the time they were doing the searches. However, here's a new thing that has happened, and that is I've begun to find cases in NamUs from the time frame of Israel Keys that were not previously in NamUs.
That's correct.
So, they're entered into NamUs in 2019 and 2020 and 2021. So those cases are starting to snap some things into focus for me. That's not what today is about. Today is about what if the FBI had not poorly steered the interview with the U.S. attorneys talking to Israel Keys about April 9th, 2009, and the Tupper Lake bank robbery and what was leading up to it. This is what you said that made me go down this path. You said, what would the interpretation by the family and the media be of the abduction of Bill and Lorraine Currier if we had no Israel Keys?
No, if we didn't know that what he had done, we would assume that they went off and we would assume without additional information. I'm sorry, I would assume without additional information to substantiate something else that something internally happened. And the reason I say that is because of all the stuff we know about, Bill being in poor health, Lorraine being also in poor health, like all the stuff we found out. They're older. They disappeared together. Their car was found, not at their house. The gun was missing. Their inner door of their garage was broken into. Like the information, actually, that would throw me off. But
The
I
car
would,
would throw me off.
the car,
Yeah, the car being found at CVS would throw me off.
it's, well, in the story that I told without the ending, the car threw me off.
Right. So this is what we're getting to. When we look at these cases that we know Israel Keys is involved in, we're really limited to Samantha Koenig and then Bill and Lorraine Currier and then the 2 bank robberies and the fire. Those are the 6 official things, really. Incidents, if you want to call them that.
But I want to clarify, there was in the conversation that he had when they were pushing for more bodies, they made the leap from the Tupper Lake bank robbery. And the way that he answers the question about remains being in New York, it's very evasive. Because he says, well, yeah, there's remains in New York, but he sort of subtly implies it has like absolutely nothing to do with anything else they've been talking about.
Right.
Um, and they didn't pick up on that because it was Deborah Feldman, Deborah Feldman, Deborah Feldman. And I'm not saying one way or the other if she was his victim or not, but I am saying he certainly answered the question in a way that it leaves open a wide variety of responses.
Right. And I totally agree with that. He said something there, though, that bothered me. And that statement was, I went a lot of places and I can tell you the highlights, as it were, but the the particulars in between I'm getting kind of fuzzy on. And I wondered how far back that went and how much, like, he really remembered of what he had done. And I'm pretty sure that he remembered everything because of how carefully he chose his words. But I'm not so sure that he necessarily remembered years. Like, I'm not so sure that like 2008 versus 2009 would have made any sense to him.
He actually said that he was getting things confused.
Right. And so,
And I think that stemmed from them being so sure he had killed Deborah Feldman, and he's like, I didn't kill her, so I must have said something wrong here.
well, I'm positive. I'm positive that's what it was because
Well, the way that, and I'm not saying, again, I'm not saying one way or the other. However, there are different things in the way he reacted to stuff that lead me to believe other things. If you've got an FBI agent saying this is the only person that could possibly be, and you're trying to recount what you told them, and you're going, but it's not her. So, like, okay, there's a misunderstanding here. What is it? Oh, maybe I told them the wrong year, or
but
maybe I told them
so
the
so
wrong place.
here is what I think he was doing there. I think he killed someone who looked like Deborah Feldman, and I think I know who it was. And she's going to come up this summer, as well as another nearby. But the bodies are years apart, but I think I think he grabbed another person nearby there as well. And it's not an area that I ever would have thought to look in, and it was very fascinating because there's so little available about this. However, it just happens that the state police in one area and the detective in another area seem willing to talk, and I think that we should take them up on it and discuss with them what they have on these cases. The gist of this is like it's an intersection of two roads. One road goes into one state and one road goes into another state. The bodies aren't that far apart, but because of where they are, they're in two separate jurisdictions, two separate states. I revisited the timeline. And here's what I really wanted to know because you had some anomalies that you had looked.
I just want to point out something. The Israel Keys timeline that I constructed is a shortcut on my computer.
Oh, wow.
I can pull it up instantaneously. It's so ridiculous.
Well, that's what I was saying. Like this case, like you end
Oh
up on
my
this.
gosh. I'm ashamed of that. That's terrible.
What we discovered was that some items on the timeline were weird anomalies. And this is something we brought up in season one, but we're coming back to it now because we think we've started to wrap our heads around what was happening. And it does take us to some states we've never really been before concerning Israel Keys because of rental cars and radiuses of his rental cars mileage. And because of a couple of these cases, we were able to go back through and look and ask some more questions. So the big question I was asking was, what if on this timeline, some of these rentals of hotel rooms and campgrounds and stuff like that, what if those were alibis and he was driving? And one of the places that it took me first in all of this nonsense before Tupper Lake was Alabama. I'm not saying this case is Israel Keys related, but the case itself takes place in an area where, unless exactly what the media put out less than 24 hours after it happened is the truth, I don't know that the resources are there in that area to ever know otherwise. And
Like, well, I am not so sure that what the media did put out is not the truth. It seems like a very viable story, and it seems like there's a lot of details in there. Like I said, the car being 10 miles away from where the driver of the car ultimately ended up, that's weird, but maybe he had a lot of steam to blow off. I don't know. Um, but you're right, because that case wasn't investigated. That case, the story was told and the case was closed.
right, and that's what bothered me about it. And that's what made me wonder if they've got everybody sitting there and they think they know everything, why would they look any further? So
They're
there's
not going to. They haven't.
So this case this case takes place in Green Hill, Alabama. And the very first thing that we find is on April 7th, 2009 at around 2:28 p.m. Articles start being posted that 4 people were found dead at a residence in Green Hill that morning. This is where we're headed with this. So if you look at April 7th, 2009, if you look at April 7th, 2009, this is a Tuesday. Between Monday night and Tuesday morning, there are 4 murders. And just based on what is here, I have questions. And that's like I just wanted to point out to you. You said you wanted to record this, so this is sort of me coming off the cuff. I have questions. So, first of all, they find 4 people dead at the Green Hill residence. And then they find the man believed to be dead around 3:30 p.m. So basically, as this stuff is coming online at 2:28, 2:30 p.m., they're adding in other details. But this article leaves a lot to be desired. This is what the story says. Then I'm going to tell you what they back it up with. And then I want to hear what you think of the questions I have.
Okay.
So, 4 people were found dead at a Green Hill residence Tuesday morning, and the man believed to be behind the deaths was found dead near his burning home a few hours later. A helicopter flying high overhead, which was flown by the Alabama State Troopers, found Kevin Garner, 45, dead of what appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the chest in a wooded area about 200 yards from his Priceville, Alabama home, about 3:30 p.m. The first call about a fire in Garner's house, so this is the Priceville house, was called in about 3 a.m. on Tuesday. Only soot and rubble were left of the large 2-story home by afternoon. Investigators from the State Fire Marshal's Office, the Lauderdale County Sheriff's Department, the Alabama Bureau of Investigation, and others, and I noticed that there were U.S. Marshals in here, so I'm just going to throw that in. It's not in the article, but they're in the photos. We're sifting through the debris of the house all day. Cadaver dogs were also brought in. Kevin Garner is identified as the estranged husband of Tammy Morgan Garner, one of the people who was found dead inside her Green Hill home. Others killed were Kevin and Tammy Garner's 16-year-old daughter, Chelsea Garner, Karen Beatty, who turns out to be Kevin Garner's sister, and an 11-year-old boy who turns out to be Karen Beatty's son, Bobby. That's not in the article. I'm just telling you that's who it is. And so that's Karen's son and Tammy and Kevin's nephew and Chelsea's cousin, Bobby. The slayings happened around midnight Monday, and the bodies were found by a neighbor about 8:30 a.m. Tuesday. At the time, Lauderdale County Sheriff Ronnie Willis said, "We're trying to figure out if this is a murder-suicide or what we really had." The bodies had wounds, but Somerville said they aren't sure how they were killed. Officials said investigators suspect that a gun was used. An autopsy will be done to determine the cause of death of the people found in the house. 2 vehicles driven by Garner were found, officials said. According to court records, Kevin and Tammy Garner had been separated for 8 months, and Tammy had alleged that Kevin Garner physically and mentally abused her. They were scheduled to appear in court again Wednesday, which would have been April the 8th. Sheriff Willis told WAFF 48 News that U.S. Marshals, the Alabama Bureau of Investigation, and forensic officials from Huntsville have been called in to assist in the investigation. Willis said he can't remember this many people being murdered at one time as long as he's been in law enforcement. Okay, so if you follow this case over time, because this took place in 2009, we're able to do that in sort of an instant here without doing a lot of extra digging. They tell some very interesting stories, and like the local press down there basically asked anyone who knew them to reach out and to talk to them.
Chime in.
Yeah. So you get a lot of weird stories. Like one of the stories is Chelsea Garner's prom date. They were supposed to go to the prom shortly after this happened. But because it happened, they clearly weren't going to the prom. So this is what everyone is saying has happened. They're saying that Kevin Garner drove to Tammy Garner's home at 7195 County Road 73. He was apparently enraged over an impending divorce. He shot his family members. So that's his wife, his estranged wife, his daughter, his own sister, and his nephew, who had come to Alabama to testify with Tammy in her divorce case on her behalf. After the carnage, Kevin drove to the home that he and his wife and daughter shared in Priceville. He set fire to the home, and then he walked over a wooded ridge about 200 yards south of his home at 187 Old Somerville Road, and he shot himself in the chest. So somewhere in here, we find out that Kevin rented a car to do all of this, supposedly. Tammy was renting the home from a man named Reed Cannerday. And Casey Butler is Chelsea's boyfriend. He found the bodies when he walked over to the home Tuesday morning because Chelsea wasn't answering her phone and he could see her car was in the driveway. He looked through the glass in the front door. He saw bodies and he went inside. He's the one who called 911. So then this is how the story seems to break out, according to the E-News Courier down there. Tammy had filed for divorce in May because she said her husband was both physically and emotionally abusive and that he was extremely controlling and was becoming more so. This is in her divorce petition. Now, at the point in time that she filed for divorce, they had been married for 21 years. They had a hearing in Morgan County Circuit Court on Monday, and they were scheduled to have a hearing at 9 a.m. in Morgan County Circuit Court on Wednesday. Kevin worked for Nova in Decatur at the time that the petition was filed. He had requested a trial after his wife petitioned for divorce last year, which is why this is why the process is taking so long. Tammy believed that her husband was violent, but she could not have foreseen this cruel end, is how they write it. After Monday's hearing, Kevin leased a white 2009 Hyundai Sonata from Enterprise Rent-A-Car in Decatur. At some point, he drove the rental car to Green Hill, and he parked it about a half a mile from his wife's home on County Road 73. Sometime around midnight, authorities believe that Kevin entered the home and killed the 4 family members, and then he fled in his wife's green 1993 Subaru Legacy. Corley said that fire investigators believe that Kevin set fire to the vehicle and the home in Priceville after the shootings. Priceville firefighters were called to the home about 2:59 a.m. When authorities learned of the deaths of the 4 in Greenville, they did not know Kevin's whereabouts. When fire investigators checked the charred Priceville home for Kevin's body and could not find it, they had to consider that he might be still alive and still at large. Believing he could be a danger to others, law enforcement officials issued all-points bulletins throughout the morning and early afternoon for the Subaru Legacy, then for Kevin's Ford F-150 pickup truck, and then for the rented Hyundai. They locked down the Priceville school because a faculty member was slated to testify in the Garner divorce proceedings. So, and by the way, they're like escorting all of the judges and lawyers to the courthouse that day, just in case he's on a rant. So, and this is a different sheriff. This is Sheriff Corley. Oh, hold on, I think that's the sheriff. Corley. Who's Corley?
Different from what?
Well, so there's 2 sheriffs involved. There's Mike Corley in one county, because these are like, even though these people are living in 2 separate counties, technically they're not very far from each other, but technically they're 2 different counties, 2 different sheriffs, 2 different police departments. Everything is different at each crime scene.
Right. Yeah, no, I got you. Okay.
So Sheriff Corley was uncertain Tuesday night how Kevin's body was found. He said it was spotted near the house about 3:45 p.m. by an Alabama State Trooper helicopter pilot who was flying over the property. They were searching for his body, by the way. That's interesting to me.
Why?
So, well, why are they searching for his body if they're issuing all these all points bulletins? Why are they saying to the media we're searching for his body, sending a helicopter up to search for his body if they're issuing an all points bulletin?
Um, what would the like natural reaction to finding, the wife, mother, daughter, sister, nephew, all of them be dead? I think that, and then the house being burnt down, because I assume she moved out and they were living in a house that wasn't their house, and then he was at probably like the family home, and the
Yeah,
house
she
burns
was at a
down.
rental. She's at a rental home,
So
and
to
he's
me,
living in
it
the
would
old
make
home.
perfect sense that like he was responsible for the deaths, and now that the house is burning down, like you see what I mean? Like it's not a big jump.
No, I'm not saying that it is a big jump. I'm just saying that it sort of ends there. Like the investigation was over before it began.
Right, because it was a domestic situation. I mean, yeah, 5 people died, but it that's a lot of I can't imagine, and maybe you can tell me, but I can't imagine like a serial killer being motivated by there's 5 different types of people.
Oh, I'm not necessarily thinking that's the case. I'm just I'm asking the question what if, well, mainly because I can. But I'm asking the question what if because
Can you specify what if what?
like what if it's not what if it's not as simple as it seems? Okay, so in this case, I'm not really questioning it. I'm using it as an example.
Hmm.
Okay, in this case, like there was no real what's the word? Investigation.
Investigation.
Yeah, there was no real investigation to this, and that part bothers me because so you've got this whole family homicide going on, right?
Hmm.
What would what would it look like if somebody had found Bill Courier and Lorraine Courier in that house?
You mean
Him
in
shot to
Vermont?
death. Yeah.
Um, well, I think that you mean in the farmhouse.
Yeah, in the farmhouse, not in their house.
Hmm. Well, one thing for certain would be there's no mention anywhere of any sort of sexual assault occurring.
Okay.
And to me, that's a key component that's always going to be part of Keys's MO. I can't speak to all the other serial killers out there, but in his particular situation, that was a huge part of killing people. He was a sadist. So I feel like it'd be really obvious that Lorraine and Bill were both sexually assaulted. Are you saying like if they had been found shot to death, like because he left them there, like he said, he left them there in garbage bags in the basement.
So you think
So,
he sexually assaulted Bill?
well, don't you?
I don't know. He was dead. He shot him to death.
Right, but it's already established that being alive wasn't a prerequisite.
I'm with you. I'm just talking about it.
Well, okay, so yeah, I do feel like I feel like he sexually assaulted everybody that he killed. That was most of the reason why he did it. Uh, so there's that. So that would come into play. Uh, because you said, what would it be like if Bill and Lorraine had been found in the farmhouse?
Right.
And so what? And do you mean like in the exact situation he talks about leaving them in?
Or if Lorraine had run away, or like I'm just saying, if Lorraine had run
But it's
away and the
still with
cops come
keys
back
and
and it's only keys there, and only Bill there, no keys.
well, I mean, I think that Bill was shot and he was shot. He unloaded the gun in him, is what he said. So like 6 times. So you can't shoot yourself 6 times. Uh, and she had been, well, if she had escaped when she tried to, she wouldn't have been assaulted by that point, I don't think.
Right.
Um, but if she had gotten away and they'd come back, I can't really play that out in my mind because I don't know what he would have done.
Okay. So let's take a different angle then.
Okay.
By the way, this all comes up because there's about to be a trial of a woman who killed her father on Old Somerville Road in Priceville in the house next door
Hmm.
in 2020. She did it during the pandemic. So this all came up because I was looking back through that timeline and I was like, whoa. Anyways, so that's a different part of this. But let's look at it this way. So when you go and leave your rental car at a house, you kill 4 people inside, and you take your estranged wife's car and you drive it away. First question, why do you burn it?
I feel like that's out of rage.
So you're burning the car out of rage.
I feel like everything this dude's life was like he felt like it was over and he basically wanted to take everybody with him. That's what I see happening there because I have a feeling the I think that he had prolonged like the proceedings for her to get her divorce for as long as possible. And I'm of the mindset that if you're married and your spouse wants to get divorced, there's nothing wrong with like trying to work things out, but you don't want to take that to trial. Like, what are they going to do? Find that she can't have the divorce, so then you're going to be married to somebody who doesn't want to be married to you?
That's
It's
not what a
weird.
divorce trial is about. A
It's
divorce
about
trial
the
is
assets. I get it. I get
she's
that.
well, she did. So the minute she accused him of abuse, he took umbrage with that.
I
So
understand that, but at the end of the day, the split is never unless somebody just throws their hands up in the air and gives up.
oh, it's never going to be easy. Is that where you're going?
No, I'm saying it's going to be like there's a division that occurs in divorces that's pretty standard.
Right.
And that's not their daughter was 16, so it's not like they had little children. I don't know what kind of assets they had, but it would be split probably right down the middle. And
Well, they're an
he
equitable distribution state, so it's not going to be. It's going to be divided by a judge fairly and equitably if they can't do it themselves. That's the idea.
right, and there's no point in going to trial in a divorce ever. There really isn't. But it just seems like when you're fighting a divorce, and so if he had been given some sort of information that he realized, it's like the walls closing in basically, because they had one hearing on Monday and then they had another hearing that was going to be on Wednesday. Now, he killed his daughter, he killed his sister. I mean, he really only had to kill his wife to not have the divorce happen.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. And so that's why I'm saying, like, he basically felt like the life he had lived for the past 21 years was over. This lady had ruined it. The world, he was not in control of his world. And he was enraged and he killed all of them. Then, he burnt the car because, he's still mad. And then now I had thought he had to drive. I mean, I thought he had to walk 10 miles, but sounds like he just drove back to the rental car and then left in the rental car. But
No.
um,
That's not what happened.
okay.
The rental car was still at her house. He
Oh, so
drove
he
her
did walk.
car. Yeah, he drove her car and he burnt her car.
He said that the thing that you were reading from it said that he had parked like a little bit away from the house.
So he drove the rental car to like within a half mile of her house, but
Okay,
she
yeah.
couldn't see him. Then he walked to her house, committed the shootings, and then left her house in her Subaru Legacy, and then he burnt that out after. Like it wasn't at his house. It was in the same county he lived in, but it was not at his house. He burned it out and then apparently walked home, and then he burned down his house. And then I don't know why he shot himself in the chest in the woods.
Right, because his rage had subsided and he realized what he did. Or he may have it doesn't surprise me that someone who would be accused of more than anything emotional abuse, I guess. He was probably really surprised to find out you know, I don't feel like a lot of old school emotional abusers realize they are emotionally abusive. And I think that it's shocking when they figure it out. Now, you realize if you like slap your family members around, that's a less surprising element of it. But I think that a lot of shocking realizations probably came to the surface. And he did it out of rage because um, and probably it was towards his wife, but it's a special kind of rage if you take out your daughter and your nephew and even his sister. I mean, I get it that she was like testifying against him, but again, without the wife, she wouldn't be testifying. So it was he was teaching everybody a lesson.
I so when I
Well,
look,
the biggest thing about this for me was the timeline as far as Keys goes. Okay. He couldn't have got to Alabama by midnight going into the 7th.
he could have.
No, he couldn't have.
What if he didn't fly?
Well, if he was in Seattle on the 7th and he flew or he didn't
Mm-mm.
fly,
No, no, no.
okay, so you're going to have to say other than he didn't fly because he was
I'm,
with his
I'm
daughter camping. We know that.
I understand that.
Hmm.
So the problem comes in that he had to rent the rental car on the 7th.
Hmm.
That's where the timeline problem comes in. It's not that, and by the way, I'm not suggesting or speculating that Israel Keys did this. What I'm asking is, in the Israel Keys timeline,
Hmm.
crimes like this happening where he can't be accounted for. Now he can here. That's specifically why I chose it. This crime, if his last day of camping is say the 4th or 5th or whatever, and if just that hotel room and flight are bullshit, that means he could leave there on the 5th. So I was just asking it from the perspective of when crimes like this happen, could he have ever committed anything like that? You seem to have answered it with no, that you thought there would have to be a sexual assault element to it all. You didn't feel like uh, I don't believe that he made a 38-hour drive to do this, by the way. That's not really where I'm going with this.
Well, and I said that there's no way he could have gotten there. And as far as I know, um, the car rental in New Hampshire probably took place. I would think that if it was like off for some reason, they would update that. So, like, how do you get from Washington to Alabama to because
The
the
car rental has to happen in Manchester.
on the 7th.
Right.
And that would be a long way to get. So he would have had to have in this situation he would have had to kill. Now, when did this house fire start? I think that's where I went. The house fire and the man being found, like it didn't coincide with him being able to rent a car in New Hampshire on that date.
See okay. So the way that this one broke down, so Monday at midnight would have been,
It's the 6th going into the 7th. Yeah.
yeah. So that's the 6th going into the 7th. So
All the people
it
were killed around then.
right. So everybody is dead by roughly 3:30 a.m. Everybody.
Now, my understanding, and I am confused by this, but uh, how long? It was my understanding that the house burning down and the husband shooting himself, it wasn't just like a couple hours later. It was like the following day.
They found him on the 7th. Is that what you mean?
Let's see. Let me think. Did they find him in the afternoon?
He was found Tuesday afternoon.
Tuesday. Okay, yeah. So you're going from Monday into Tuesday, and you've
Right.
got so we're talking about midnight ish. He shoots everybody. Then he burns the house down,
That all
and
happens in the night.
okay, so it is like consecutive then.
Yeah, like
He's
so
just not found till the following day because he's not in
yeah,
the house.
he's found 10 hours later by a helicopter flying overhead, basically. But everything happens, but like nothing happens after the 911 calls start rolling in, which is around 3 a.m.
Okay.
So everything has happened by then. He is no longer like, and I say that because where all the firefighters and police are and the burned out car is very close to where he was found dead. It's 14 hours from there to Manchester, New Hampshire. So there's a tight window where theoretically he could have rented a car that day. Okay, I'm saying all of this to say how we rule out more unusual things related to Israel Keys. The behavior of this guy wandering off and shooting himself in the chest, that's actually pretty common. Like it's pretty common for this type of situation to end like that, to find that guy dead over a ridge. And I can trace that in the US all the way back to 1929 behavior where someone has killed their entire family and hours later they are found to be, shot to death in the woods near the home of one of the events. This event, the fire, but they weren't very far away from the original event. But if Israel Keys committed a crime like this, do you think anyone would ever have noticed?
I'm not sure. This particular crime, it'd be really hard because of the two locations. That's a like I wouldn't peg that on a stranger, even if they could affirmatively deduce the husband didn't do it, because somebody's got to know that um, there's somebody living in a rental house and somebody living at the other house. Like all that's information that's not just like readily available.
Yeah.
And now the car being 10 miles away threw me off. But if somebody's enraged enough to kill, everybody in their life, they can certainly walk 10 miles. They probably should have done that before they killed everybody. Perhaps they wouldn't have. And so the sexual assault is going to be a key component in every single one of Israel Key's victims. He would not have killed somebody and not sexually assaulted them, even if it's after death. So that to me is a huge part of it. Yes. He didn't get any joy out of killing people just to kill them. That wasn't what he did. He killed them, and he it did nothing for him. The killing didn't. It was the attack. It was the control. It was that part of it. And so that being said, it it would add something to this particular case we're talking about if that were the case. And I think investigators would see that and look further, I would think. Now, when there's circumstances where it's not checked for, it's not readily apparent, I mean, I guess it could slip through the cracks. I don't know. I think that I don't think it's been looked at a whole lot, because I think at least I believe what he said as far as the majority of his, like, I think he said there was one body that was found. I believe most of his victims haven't been found yet.
Okay.
So it wouldn't even be a thing, really.
Well, that's as of his knowledge, because that's an important thing to say. That's his
in
knowledge.
2012.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like a lot of his victims haven't been found. And so in these kind of situations where you've got a father that's blown off the handle, killed everybody, and then killed himself, all those bodies were right there. Like, I don't think, because even with Bill and Lorraine, like, they weren't in their house.
Right.
And so he's still like, they were still transported. And honestly, it's weird because, he tried to set the farmhouse on fire and that would have brought attention to them immediately. There's all kinds of things to unpack about that. But that reminds me, actually, when I was looking at the vault information, the DNA, did you want to update that? I
Uh,
don't know if it's necessary for that to be updated. I don't know.
talking about Delmar sample.
Right.
So basically, there's DNA in the Delmar sample case that does not match Israel Keys. The problem with that DNA is it's not a good enough sample for them to continue to use it because of how testing was done at the time that they compared things. So,
Well, and it's not known if it's Delmar's DNA even, but they did without question exclude it from being Israel Keys.
right, they did exclude it from Israel Keys.
And Israel Keys is in CODIS.
He is in CODIS. We were able to confirm that.
And anything, so in theory, that's another thing that makes me think that his victims' bodies probably haven't been found, or if they had been found, they weren't in a state where it could be tested because it would show up. Because anytime there's, a body that has a sexual assault kit to be run on it, and it goes into CODIS, it's going to show that it matches him if it does. Now, he said he didn't leak DNA anywhere. I sort of feel like he was behind on the times. And, CODIS does do that direct sample, but it's not like, I mean, when you've got bones, you're not going to find evidence of sexual assault on them.
Yeah, the passage of time works against you that way. Is that what you're
Well,
thinking?
yeah, well, yeah, because it's on skin, and skin is gone, and I mean, it gets eaten by bugs, and I mean, you're not going. It's a. I'm just saying that in the event that that bodies are recovered in a state that they can be analyzed and evidence collected, then it will show up. And I haven't heard. I mean, not that I expect them to be, shouting it from the rooftops or anything, but I haven't heard any connections being made. Have you?
No, I haven't. I haven't seen anything where anything has been linked to Keys at all.
No, it hasn't. And so the one thing that was sort of up in the air, and the reason I bring it up now is because what I saw when I was doing the research was that they had found this Dr. Pepper can, they hadn't tested it, they wanted to test it to see if it matched Keys, and they tested a fingerprint which did not match Keys,
And then they
and
tested the DNA, and it
the
also did not
DNA
match Keys.
the DNA, it didn't match anybody. What it did was it excluded. It could not possibly be Israel Key's DNA because the segments that they used to test, he didn't have his DNA didn't have those matching segments. However, they did that, but the sample wasn't so that it couldn't even determine the sex of the person.
Right,
Um, all it could determine specifically was that it wasn't Israel Key's DNA. And, we've talked about this kind of DNA stuff before because sometimes, like, if he had had some of those segments of the DNA, then like they wouldn't be able to include him as a match, but he couldn't be excluded as a match either. And that gets really confusing. But it just so happens in this case, he was completely excluded as possibly being that donor. So it's somebody, but it could be anybody else but him, basically, until they're tested. And then it would exclude other people as well. But they're never going to be able to do a match on that.
right.
They can just include or exclude people. And I'm sure at this point, I don't think the test results, like it didn't give the segments and everything, but that would actually create characteristics. So you might even be able to tell that it was Delmar's actual DNA. Or I think he's got kids, maybe.
You could potentially. Well, I don't know if Delmar had kids.
I don't know. See, I don't know about that, but what the criteria, it was a very specific match or non-match that or I'm sorry, inclusion or exclusion. It wasn't anything beyond that. And like I said, they excluded Israel Keys. I never saw that result before. I don't think it was in some of the stuff I saw, or it was, and I didn't read it to say what it actually said. And I sent it to you, and you agreed that's what it said, right?
Yep, I agree.
He was excluded as being a match. So if that, and I would say if that DNA on that Dr. Pepper can isn't Delmar's, uh, I would say that 100% uh, it's that's the killer's DNA or the person involved in this DNA. But it would be weird for Israel Keys to leave behind a drink, I think. I thought that all along, but that seemed to be like, it was something tangible that they had that sort of fit the situation. And so it was a big deal. And then, you hear about like all the leading up to it, but then nobody says, oh, yeah, by the way, it didn't match. So.
Well, so that's where we're starting our summer season, hunting down more information about Israel Keys. It's not going to be a full season the way we like to do that.
Well, Israel Keys is a constant, and there are always things that come up. Even when we've done any case I do before I start or as I'm researching it, I have him in the back of my mind. And you know what? The biggest thing is like if it's after he killed himself, I'm like, yeah, that can't be him. And then I move forward researching the case. But otherwise, I have to. And I know entirely too much in my brain about different things that were said and details and stuff like that. Um, and it's like an instantaneous comparison. So it's constantly on my mind, and I feel like it will always be that way. And I actually like doing sort of this more uh, random inclusion of cases that aren't covered as much, but like I don't get as obsessed with them,
Oh, I'm obsessed with these family sides like this. Like I have been for many, many years. Like a lot of my writing stuff was it's just always interesting to me. Like the DuPont case, we didn't really cover that because that was a weird one. But the DuPont case was one of the unsolved mysteries episodes.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that.
Briefly, we didn't go into any detail there. But my thing with those cases is I get I get I always wonder like when it's like if you think about Bradford Bishop or Robert Fisher, like would we know if like something really weird had happened to them? Just kind of like the questions I'm asking here. Like, would we
Well,
know?
I don't know that we would know, but it's my expectation that somebody, okay, and this would be somebody who knows the people involved, they would say, that doesn't seem right. Okay.
Yeah,
And they would speak up and say, especially like the one we talked about in Alabama, it seems like the parents or any other relative would say, well, he would have never killed his sister, right? Or
right.
something like that. So I have a little bit of an expectation that people who actually know the situation would, say that does not seem right. And it would go from there, obviously, depending on the pushback you get from law enforcement and how much you really think that they didn't that what they're saying happened didn't happen. But so yeah, I mean, I don't know that we would ever know, but I know that if I was hearing pushback from family members or people involved in the situation who said, I'm so sure that didn't happen, that would make me look harder. it it's interesting because unfortunately a lot of times it really is what it looks like it is.
It is. It's pretty straight up. But one of the things that we are going to cover, and I just want to, I want to point this number out so that people understand it. In the time since we recorded the episode to now, and particularly the time since we developed our tracking list. I said episode, I mean season. Uh, Name us entries of interest for me between the times I felt like Israel Keys was a killer, and I have it marked as 1997 up to 2012. The number of entries that have gone in to name us is 756 new missing persons cases.
Right. And so, as far as I'm concerned, every single one of those has to be assessed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
Like
agree with you on that.
my
I'll give you the parameters for the search that I used, and then I'm going to start narrowing them down first. Though I wasn't going to just throw you in there.
well, and of course you and I do things differently, and um
All the time.
yeah, completely differently. And I wanted to get a take on like what you're sort of getting at with, because you've thrown several cases at me, and I know I started it, so it's totally my fault. To me, it just seemed very it could have totally been what happened, but who knows? We'll talk about it when we get into that stuff. But yeah, 756 new cases. I would have to look at all of them. I do think that we are looking for which when we're looking at missing persons cases, so we have no idea, there's no bodies there. We don't know if they've been sexually assaulted because they haven't been found yet. So from that parameter, it's, what were they doing? Where were they? Where was Israel Keys?
Right.
And sort of an assessment of if there's a logical explanation for their disappearance. Um, and I know that might seem very broad, but I've been pretty successful at, I don't have a problem narrowing everybody out like by using that. But, somebody that's walked away from their life, are they a runaway, or are they, were they murdered by somebody very obvious? And I don't know how I feel about giving somebody that committed suicide in the course of like killing their whole family. I don't know. That's a little different from giving a domestic partner that's still alive a way out. So,
No. My whole point with this, like, I wasn't trying to go either way. I think if it's a case where somebody's still alive, then we're gonna have to be like, there's stuff that we've left out of this whole process because of that. But when it comes to uh, cases like this, what I really wanted to show was sort of the questions that we have and how you could like. This is a pretty, to me, it's a pretty straightforward case.
yeah, I
This guy did
agree.
it, but it's easy to talk about from the perspective of here's what this case looks like. Here's what they said happened. Do we feel like it was investigated, or do we feel like they kind of had it from the jump? That's why I used it. It was because it's a tragic story. These people have lost their lives. It's not a case that I could like go down there with a recorder and start talking to people. You know what I mean?
Well, no, I mean, that would be like literally beating a dead
Pointless.
horse.
Yeah, it'd be
And
pointless. But the reason I'm saying this one is because it's kind of a softball. Because one of the first things that popped up was Alaska had 220 new missing persons cases.
right.
And a lot of those were interesting to me because they had a lot of young ladies who might not have been paid attention to otherwise.
Yeah.
I don't know how to. I don't know
So do
what
you
word.
think that is Keys?
What do you mean? There's 220 of them. I don't know. We're just starting.
Oh, well, but I mean, with Keith, he said Samantha Koenig was the only one he did up there.
Do you believe Keys?
Well, he got caught shortly thereafter, so
Okay, so here's another one. There's a lot of young girls in Washington that went missing in his time frame. A lot of
mhm.
young girls in Oregon. Like Washington State had 20 cases, Oregon had 10. like that have, and like these are cases I had never laid eyes on before. I didn't even know these people were missing, and it turns out some of them are not missing. By the way,
I know.
that's my favorite thing. Is
That
when
is,
someone are not
yeah,
missing.
and it's unfortunate that I'm so against saying anything about it because it is hilarious.
There's a lot of people that are alive that just don't want to be found by like whoever reported them missing.
Right, but like you can, like they're no question alive, and they're not missing to anybody because I can find them, and I'm so sure it's the same person. But I don't want to call those people out because it's not my business, and I maybe if it was a kid, I might do it, but probably not even then, really, because kids leave for a reason.
I ended up in this situation. Well, we've discussed that kind of at length in different times. I ended up in this situation where another podcast posited a victim of keys that I knew was alive, and I didn't say anything. I actually, like, some of the researchers from that podcast reach out to me from time to time, so I knew that it was happening. And the way that I first presented it was like, oh, you don't want to give a defense in that case. And that means a case is being brought up and connected back to like an Israel Keys or like another serial killer or whatever. I follow your rule there. And that is, we don't want to give a defense if we can avoid it. Meaning we think there's a suspect that may be arrested.
Right. And when I say that, it's not just, I mean, there's always going to be a suspect. It's like there's a really good chance this person did it, is how I see it.
Right. So
more likely than not.
When we look at cases like that, that sort of falls into a very gray area for us where we tread really slowly and really carefully. And we really don't, a lot of times you guys, we don't release stuff about those cases. One of the hardest things for me is running into kids cases because a lot of times you can't FOIA kids when they're still kids. Now, in most of the situations related to Israel Keys in Colorado, like we've not run into that yet. Colorado was disappointing for me overall, but with Israel Keys and coming back to that for the summer, there's a lot of like new things that we can talk about there. But I threw out to these people, they asked me a question, I answered. You don't want to give a defense in that case because there was a suspect. The husband was a suspect. This husband is a suspect, a prime suspect in the disappearance. However, I did not go any further and say, oh, and by the way, they're alive, because there was a situation there where they were like, no, and this is how it goes. They would never leave their children. Okay, well, guess what? Sometimes people do. I don't know why. I can't explain it to you. I wish that I could like look at it and go, that person left their children, that person didn't. It doesn't work like that. But every once in a while, someone has something so unique about them. In this particular instance, it was an arrest photo and a tattoo that took place much, much, much later than the disappearance and much, much later than Key's death. That's what led me to go, oh, that person is that person.
Well, and I found quite a few people that are alive and well, and I don't say a word about any of it because it's not my place. And
they just get marked off the list quietly.
Right. And so I don't blame you. I feel like if I could, I feel like if somebody is positing alive people that are marked as missing as possible victims of Keys, I feel like that is lacking some research.
Yeah. And well, it's one of those things where I have found myself in some sticky situations where I kind of have to like,
Man, I know.
double check myself. I do that, but I do it more from the perspective of I don't mind speculating. It's a podcast.
For the most part, my brain operates in that mode. That's why I'm so like, we can't say that, we can't do that, we can't do this, the other, whatever. And because I live there, I don't let myself go too far speculating.
Yeah. Well, that's all I got for today. What do you got?
That's it. I mean, we weren't even going to record today, so.
Thank you for joining us. We are sponsored by LabRottiCreations.com. You can check them out at LabRottiCreations.com, and you can still use the code CRIMEXS for a fun pop pet portrait of your own pet. You can also reach us on Twitter, Instagram at TrueCrimeXS, or you can give us a call if you know anything about any of the cases that we're talking about at 252-365 5593. You can also reach us at Gmail at truecrimexs@gmail.com. And you can check out our website at www.truecrimexs.com. We'll see you next time.
This is True Crime XS.
So sometimes I wonder why I come across these cases and what I'm doing. If you may have heard me mention in there in the storytelling about the Garner case down in Alabama, that he had rented in April a Hyundai Sonata. And one of the things that we do quite a bit of is we go through the timeline with Israel Keys even now. And in April of 2008 and April of 2009 in two different locations, Israel Keys also rented a Hyundai Sonata. Probably not related at all, right?
Autumn rain falling on the rooftops, calling birds of summer back south to wander. It's a chance to start again on the wing of remember when. All the plans that we made in summer, they are shining memories, calling to each other. Trouble disappear in your atmosphere. Falling leaves, the horizon's on fire below. I hold on tightly to all that I've come to know. How we feel in the stillness, something special in the spell of the night. It's elemental, wild world in its perfect mess. It's the little things that make it all worth it. That make it all worth it. Winter chill and the snow is falling on the cedar still, and the freezing water